All right, welcome. This is a info session with the Oregon Community Food Systems Network on several grants that are upcoming for producers and those working in the food system. And first, we're going to hear from Amy Gilroy at ODA, Oregon Department of Agriculture, who is going to be sharing updates on several grant programs that they have. Sorry to have you do your intro twice, Amy, but if you don't mind doing another quick intro, that'd be great.
Okay, I will do that. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Gilroy. I work for the Oregon Department of Agriculture. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm in the marketing and development program area. So part of my job is responsible for helping producers and food makers and really anyone that's running an agricultural food business in the state to get connected to different markets. I mostly work in the local regional and institutional market space. I'm also the lead at the agency for the Farm to School program in the state of Oregon, which provides a subsidy for schools and other food sponsors when they buy qualified Oregon products so they can work with specific farmers in their communities. And so today I'm going to talk about a few grant resources or grant programs that ODA currently has open. And then I'm going to open it up. I'm going to also talk about the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant Program, which was just recently announced. But I think I'll spend some time sort of hearing from you all on the call if you have any questions about the RFSI or some of the other grant programs. But I think we wanted to, prioritize the Resilient Food System Infrastructure program right now just because it launched earlier this week, and we've been fielding a lot of questions about it. If you don't have any questions about it right now, that's okay too. I'll talk about some office hours that are going to be coming up that we're going to be hosting from different regions in the state too. So there's plenty of opportunity over the next few weeks to engage with ODA about that grant program. Okay, and then I'm going to share my screen, and I have a little problem. I have some troubles doing this for some reason on Zoom, so you may lose me video wise, but um I
No
will be
problem.
up here. And then Andrew, how much time? What are some
We
of
have
my
we have a full hour for today, and I think I can do mine pretty quick. So I'd say if we get to around 40 minutes or so after questions, we'll move on to the next section.
Okay.
So we got lots of time.
All right, thanks. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Be a PDF of the slide deck on here, but essentially I'm going to talk about some grant resources to grow food and agriculture businesses in the state of Oregon. I do have a few slides. I'm going to run this in PDF just because it's a little bit easier for me. But I do have a few slides on the Regional Food Business Center, and I see that Tanya Murray is on the call, and so Tanya can chime in here for those of you that aren't familiar with the Regional Food Business Centers. But I'm going to kind of quickly move through these slides, but just wanted to mention them because one of the aspects of the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Dollar program is to coordinate or align with some of the priorities coming out of the regional food business centers. So I will touch on that today. Obviously, the centers are very new, so there's lots of questions about how the resources of the center will look on the ground. But I think it's helpful to share some of this and hopefully help ground people in what we intend the centers to do or to become over these next 5 years, or now almost 4 years of the center's investment. So the USDA has made an investment of 12 different regional food business centers across the country. And really what these centers are designed to do are to support, you can read the mission statement there, but they're to support a more resilient and competitive food system, specifically for local and regional markets. And so really what they're hoping is that, these centers will work with a lot of producers and new and emerging food businesses to help them kind of grow their businesses, strengthen their businesses, and, ensure that they have opportunities to enter some of these markets within the middle of the supply chain. So that's kind of what we're aiming to do with the centers. Oregon is part of the Northwest and Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, which is in the dark green up-hand corner here you can see on the map. And Tanya Murray is each of these states has or will have a state coordinator for the center. And so Tanya Murray is actually our state coordinator. If those of you don't already know that, maybe you already do, but she's recently, for the last few months now, been in this position. And then Oregon Department of Ag, myself is the co-lead with Lauren Gwynn at Oregon State University. So we're sort of the state team for the center and the center's offerings. So I encourage you to reach out to, Tanya or myself if you have questions about the center. But I do have a few slides on it here. And essentially each of the centers is going to have these kind of three key responsibilities. One of those is coordination of, many different resources from the federal level all the way down to the local level. I know many of you over the years have asked for more clarity on how different programs work across USDA, ODA, even some of the local government offerings, or even other programs like Business Oregon that have economic development grant programs. So, the hope that the USDA has is that we will get better coordinated with these resources over the next 5 years under the center, and be able to answer questions about how these programs can be helpful for you or your business. So there will be a lot more coordination of different resources, and hopefully more transparency between, getting you to the right contact that you need, either at USDA, ODA, or other places to get your questions answered. So, and then the other ones, technical assistance, there's going to be many different types of technical assistance offerings coming out through the center over the next 4 years related to food and emerging and small food and farm businesses. And, we have some sense of what that may look like. And we know that there are going to be some theme teams. I'll talk about those in a moment, that will also be supporting technical assistance offerings in the region. And then the other sort of activity that the USDA really wants us to be focused on is capacity building, and the way that they view this is through a business builder grant program, which will be forthcoming. Oregon State University is going to manage the business builder grant program across the 6-state region. I don't have a slide on that today because it's still sort of in the works of determining what it's going to look like, but I can tell you that they will be relatively smaller grant awards, some of them competitive, some of them non-competitive, specifically for individual businesses. And they can be for small equipment purchases, but they can also be for costs related to getting specific assistance to operate your business, technical assistance opportunities, business planning, financing, kind of setting up some of those systems you might need. So we'll definitely be keeping this group informed as that program gets developed. I did want to quickly share, this is sort of, the USDA is requiring each of the center's regions to have a web presence. This is the page for the Northwest and Rocky Mountain region. So really just wanted to make sure you had this website here if you don't already. So I would jot that down, or it's in the slide deck that I shared with Andrew. And then to pay attention to, there's options here to actually sign up for some of the center's newsletters and getting on our events calendar. And again, these are going to be regional events and workshops, trainings, etc. It's going to be quite a vast place to hold different types of announcements. But in case you're curious about what's going to be happening in other states, this might be a good place to come. And of course, OCFSN does a good job of getting a lot of announcements out through their membership. So some of that will be repetitive. So there's probably not a lot that you would see on the Oregon events page that you might not already receive through OCFSN. And then the high priorities issues, I'm going to talk really briefly about that because that's sort of important for Oregon, but also for the region. But this is essentially the structure that the USDA has asked us to work towards with the way the centers are sort of governed, and what our priorities and what our activities are going to be like over the next 4 years. But essentially, Colorado State and Oregon State are the principal investigators or principal managers for the center's work. And then, so they are considered sort of our regional leads. And this is just I think this this slide is in particularly just helpful in terms of like what these names are, what these terms are. You can see on the right-hand corner, those are the 6 states that are part of our regional business center. And then you can see that these are some of the what the USDA is calling underserved stakeholder advisors or groups that they're really asking us to prioritize in our offerings and in the majority of the work that we're going to be doing over the next 4 years. So a lot of what we'll be focused on is developing relationships with a lot of organizations that are working directly with these groups and providing resources for their producers and food businesses that they work with, and identifying ways that we can be more supportive with our resources and not replicating the wheel, but putting funding actually towards some of the programming that they're already doing, or even helping some of their professional advisors or staff with more opportunity to build their skill set, particularly around new farm management and small food business development and entrepreneurship. So the idea is not that we would be doing this work, but that actually be investing in these already established programs and relationships within these targeted groups. And then these are sort of the theme areas, the top right-hand corner, that we're going to be working towards over these next 4 years. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about those, but I did want to mention them because essentially the theme teams will be offering lots of different types of opportunities in these 4 high priority issue areas related to technical assistance, workshops, events, etc. And that is where some of the resilient food system infrastructure dollars will be targeted, is in these 4 areas. So I did want to make sure that we shared those. And honestly, we're still determining exactly the scope of what these themes will be doing. And so if there's lots of questions about this, it's good that Tanya's on the call. We can talk to you a little bit more about these theme areas. But each of these themes sort of has a couple of co-chairs from the region that is managing that action plan under that theme, and really bringing things to us to say, how can this resource, for example, around connecting and scaling food entrepreneurs in Oregon, be helpful for you? So there'll be a lot of opportunity to give input on that. So, I mean, I guess I don't know if I could potentially just ask if there's any questions about, any sort of burning questions about the regional food business centers right now, or if people are like, yeah, I've heard this, I know a lot about them already.
No, let's do questions by section. I think that's great. And folks can raise their
Okay.
hand. And I just shared your slides in the chat if folks want to download those, and for folks who just joined, if they need to kind of get a refresher on the first part of this. But yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to ask.
I guess I am curious a little bit about like the connecting and scaling food entrepreneurs. You already have a team lead, but is there going to be grant funding for organizations that do the kind of work that we do down the line?
That would be targeted towards, so that, I mean, if Willamette Farm and Food Coalition is offering certain types of programming specifically for food entrepreneurs, if it has to do with, increasing their business acumen or helping them access new markets.
A lot of producers have been asking about these grants. You know about these disaster relief grant?
Yeah, because I'm wondering about some of the TA and
there we go.
the marketing that we do.
Or
market access,
market development, market access. I think it's likely that, yes, there will be some opportunities to support organizations with those technical assistance funds. I don't know how exactly those TA funds will become available to organizations. That's, I think, where we're going to need a little bit of guidance from USDA, and also, it could be that we'll probably have our own process for determining that at the state level. But if you have questions, I would stay, close to this work by signing up at the RFBC site. There's an opportunity there's an inquiry form essentially on that website I shared. And so, Jen, if you want to sign into that and just say, I'm really interested in how, my organization can take advantage of technical assistance funds, particularly for this theme area around scaling entrepreneurs. That will go into our kind of general database of questions to respond to and figure out, where does that fit within our offerings, and then the process for distributing funds, because Oregon will have a pot of technical assistance funds every year. And so, Tanya and I and Lauren and others will be working on how to make those available.
Cool.
And Amy, just to chime in here, hi Genevieve, and there's other folks that I've been doing some outreach, and that's all kind of part of this outreach process that I'm working on. Is so I've met with you and some other folks on the call, and really trying to understand what everyone's doing and where the needs are, so that we can start to kind of piece together what the best kind of plan is for that. And we'll be asking for input from this whole group of service providers that are working with farms, like Amy said, on and food entrepreneurs on business development and market access. So but yes, please sign up for the form as well, and know that I'm available as well if you just want to reach out directly.
All right. Perfect. What else you got going on? You got a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm not monitoring the chat. Are there any other?
They're good. Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay. All right, perfect. So, okay, so the USDA Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant. This just was announced by ODA earlier this week. And so I am hoping we can spend some time on this call talking about the RFSI, mostly because, well, I know that there's lots of interest in it, and I think it's really important for this group in particular. But there are some other programs I'm going to talk about too, which if people have questions, we can go there. But so essentially, I do want to make clear that this is federal funding. This is USDA dollars. These are not Oregon state general fund dollars. So we have a cooperative agreement, just like at most other states, to actually administer this grant program. So we're following some previously established guidelines and rules from USDA on what their expectations are with the use of these funds. So I want to make sure people understand how that's a little bit different than some of our state-sponsored programs, where they're more, they can be a little bit more flexible, or sometimes we obviously have a little bit more input in how they're designed. So this again is very similar in terms of how it's administered to Specialty Crop Block Grant, which is also a USDA grant that ODA administers pretty much, on behalf of the federal government. So we have to, so a lot of times, those applicants have to follow a little bit different process under these federal grant applications than they do for the state ones. But essentially, what the RFSI kind of goal is to help shore up some systems within the middle of the supply chain. So really to help us, in some ways, RFSI is a response to what we saw during the COVID pandemic, and a complete sort of breakdown of the supply chain and a disruption of food from farm to plate. And so what they're trying to do here is, and this is, I think, why they're using the term resiliency, but actually bring more decentralized resources in the form of investment for capital projects, infrastructure, and then equipment purchases to make our regional food system more resilient. So when and if something like the COVID-19 pandemic happens again, we're better equipped to keep these to keep the supply chain moving and getting food to consumers. So that's part of their thinking behind it. And the way that it sort of aligns with the Regional Food Business Center work is that the RFBC money is really designed to support individual businesses, farms, and food entrepreneurs, and really helping them become more ready to enter into these actors within the middle of the supply chain. So you can think about the RFSI funding as kind of a lot of work that's happening post-farm gate. So really getting processors, packers, wholesalers, food hubs, better equipped to handle more product from these new and emerging food businesses and farmers that are potentially receiving some of the support from the regional food business centers. But that's not necessarily a requirement, but RFSI, USDA would really like to see some alignment there. So the more that these projects that are from the RFSI funding align with some of those high priority issues of the regional food business center, the more competitive they will be. So for example, if there were let's say, a project idea from Eastern Oregon that was focused on a mill or some sort of like processing facility for flour that is going to be working with a number of dry farmland producers in that region. And so the project would potentially be helping more than one producer, and it would be really filling a gap there in the types of regional infrastructure necessary for value-added product and helping with, kind of creating an end market for that. And then also relating to the regional food business center high priority area around finding and developing markets for climate resilient agriculture. That kind of project I think would be potentially competitive in this grant program. So what this essentially is providing funds for those actors within the middle of the supply chain for processing, storage, warehousing, transportation, and distribution of those products into regional markets like retailers, institutions like schools and hospitals, and wholesalers. So that's kind of generally the big picture view of it. The eligible entities are producers or processors, nonprofits, local governments, tribal governments, and institutions. We do know that some institutions, for example, I use Eastern Oregon a lot of times in these examples because there are a lot more distribution and transportation challenges in that region. And so sometimes we see places like schools actually warehousing product for other schools in that region. So they would be eligible too for some of these funds. And the way the program is rolling out, we have 2 different cycles. Right now, the infrastructure project that application is open. And those are for, much larger projects that have beyond equipment. So essentially construction or, building retrofit or new facility construction for projects anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million. We do have $2.8 million available for the infrastructure track. I can tell you that, it's probably very unlikely if someone were to apply for a $2 million project that only benefited one producer, would probably not be funded, given the limited funds that we really do have. But we have been fielding a lot of questions from some of the larger vertically integrated producers in the state about whether, if they put in an application for that amount, would it be funded? And the answer is probably no. And then there's a simplified equipment grant, which is only for equipment purchases. There's no infrastructure costs allowed with that grant program. And those are for costs from $10,000, starting at $10,000 to $100,000. That grant will actually open February 1st and be open for until the end of the month. You can see there on the slide. So those are just kind of the high level points about the program. It is disbursement based, which is really great and very important for a lot of lower capital farms and businesses. So 50% of the funds will be dispersed upon execution of a contract with ODA or with the state. So 50% of those funds will be, basically provided to the grantees at the outset of the project. And then there'll be a 25% disbursement later after some requirements are met around reporting. And then the final distribution of funds will be towards the end of the project. So those are sort of the details about it. Gabrielle Ugaldi, who's our specialty crop block grant manager, is technically serving as the administrator of this grant right now. That is temporary. We will be hiring 2 staff under our Resilient Food System Infrastructure program, and we're really hoping to get those staff on board fairly soon. Running into a little bit of just some slowdown with the legislature on that, because the legislature did put a pause on hiring new hires until April for all state agencies, but we're trying to expedite that due to the timeline that we're required to follow by USDA. So this is Gabrielle's information here. I did want to make sure that you go to the website, because we do have a new training video up. It's about a 1-hour training video on a lot of the fine details of this grant program. We're asking that people watch that and then maybe come to us with the questions that they have. There's a lot of really important information in that training video. And then all of the application materials are available on the website. And we do have those in English, Spanish, and Swahili. And then there's also a list of office hours. So we're going to start hosting office hours by region. Now, if you have a question and you missed your regional call, it's not a big deal. You can call into any of those times and ask a question. We wanted to originally hold them by region just because we thought that might help with collaborative ideas, and people might decide they want to work together rather than submitting separate applications. So that's the purpose of those. But all of those times of those office hours, and then the links to call into those hours are available on the website as well. So I encourage you to join the one in your region if you'd like to. Or I've had some people call me and say, I don't really know which region I'm in. So if you have questions about your region, just let us know. But you can really call into any of those. So I think I'll stop there for RFSI and see if there's questions.
I think folks can just start asking their questions. There's only, or raise your hand.
I have a question.
Great.
You may have said this and I could have missed it, but between infrastructure and small equipment, is the only distinction about the dollar amount, or is there something that defines infrastructure versus small equipment?
So so basically the infrastructure projects can include other costs like a building upgrade. So maybe you're going to deconstruct and rebuild new walls. You're going to put in, you're going to be putting in new plumbing. You're going to be putting in new electricity. You're going to be, installing maybe a processing line, but you're building out, basically all of the kind of indirect that you would need for that project. And infrastructure can also include training and technical assistance. So, and also some of the architectural or design costs with thinking through, say, for example, a processing facility or a portion of a processing facility, like a bottling line or something like that. So if you're thinking about designing that, but need some support to do that, you can hire a consultant. Those types of costs would be allowable under infrastructure. Some of the systems upgrades related to some of the USDA's climate goals are also allowable. But essentially, basically all that the simplified equipment track will cover is the purchase of that equipment and the installation of it. But, anything else that would be associated with that, even doing I think the infrastructure dollars even cover things like I said, assessing the type of upgrade you might need for a facility and hiring a consultant with that, or somebody who's an expert in lean manufacturing. Those types of things would be allowable, but only under infrastructure. And there's I think there's a really good list on the website too of those allowables. But if you have any questions, feel free to come to the office hours and ask specifically about those types of costs. I did get a call yesterday about someone who was wondering about, we own this land, but can we actually put on a brand new facility, construct a brand new facility? And the answer is yes, that is allowable.
And Amy, just an add-on to that, and I'm asking these, hoping they'll be useful for other people, but in terms of what you just said and like hiring consultants, I'm just thinking about like, I have not looked at the application process for this yet, but if you are hiring a consultant, that suggests that you haven't figured out all the numbers and all of what it's going to look like, but you're putting together this proposal. So how do those things, like,
Yeah,
how do you work with that? How do you, as an applicant?
that's a really good question. And I'm not really sure how to answer that one. But I think that's definitely something to bring to the office hours. Most of the calls for the office hours, myself or Gabrielle, or both of us will likely be on those calls. So I think we can tackle that, somewhat together. Because that might actually be something that, that type of scoping or analysis, Tanya, may be better for maybe the RFPC funding, because it's a discrete amount of money and it would be for those kind of a feasibility study. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of it is an allowable expense, but it does seem to me a little bit confusing that we don't really have, the structure of it isn't really set up to only allow for those funds.
I would say as a crop block
Yeah.
recipient that there's the benefit of the ODA administering these grants than the USDA themselves. Is like I was able to put in a website redesign and just have basically the equivalent of a not to exceed line. And so I was able to put $6,000. And if I end up spending 579, I can, or 5,790 or whatever, I can petition to reallocate to either one of the other approved budget lines, or so it's just kind of like a reasonable guess. It's not as when you do something with the USDA, they're like they want the VIN number of the tractor that you're buying sometimes. So I think that that added layer is helpful here.
Yeah, that's a good point too, is some of these questions that we're getting, we don't fully know. And so we are going to USDA about them. But the other thing is that we may, in some instances, may put them, maybe put those asks, budgetary asks or otherwise, in one location, and then USDA may guide us, may when we submit our state plans, which includes all of those, approved applications, or potentially awarded applications, USDA may come back and say, actually, we're going to need you to move these expenses or figure out a different way, in some instances. But, the other thing I would say too, which, I mean, that doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. But the other thing I would say too, to Tanya's question, is that I would say if you're at that point where you would need a full scope sort of feasibility study on your project, you might not really be ready to apply for a grant like this, because these are, I would say you'd probably need to have somewhat of a half-baked project idea already, kind of already underway. So, that's just something to consider about, because again, we've got $2.8 million. Obviously, it's going to be very competitive. The director, I imagine, at ODA is going to want to see good representation of investment of these funds around the state. And so, I think we'd be looking for projects that there's already some motivation, or maybe some of these projects are already underway, and this can, these funds can help kind of get it to the next phase.
That's great. We have one quick question in the chat, and then we'll go to your next one. Does a list of eligible and ineligible products come from the USDA? Any insight into why certain things like meat, poultry are ineligible?
Yes, good question. All of the eligibility is coming from USDA. We really don't have any wiggle room around that, other than to say for a lot of those diversified operations that may be handling multiple types of products, we really need you to sort of estimate the percentage of the activities under the project that would be for the eligible products or crops versus the ineligible ones. So, if and I know that's kind of difficult to do, but if you're getting, if if you're going to be processing or handling meat or poultry products, and at the same time, maybe other types of products like grains or specialty crops, you're going to need to tell us, you know, how often or what percentage of your project's really going to handle those allowable crops or products. And those are the costs that the grant can be used towards. So that is something USDA has been pretty clear about. So, you know, if you're sorting and freezing or, you know, setting, you know, freezing or processing and putting those types of products in cold storage, and you're doing that along, and you have I mean, there's not a lot of operations that do these types of things together, because those processing lines are pretty expensive to maintain and do. But if you are doing that, unfortunately, we can only cover the percentage of the labor or equipment or et cetera that's related to the eligible products. So I believe USDA has said that meat, poultry, wild-caught seafood are ineligible because they have other resources that they have said have been specifically targeting those industries. But there's not a lot of insight I have as to why. I mean, it was a frustration on our end to see them pulled out of this grant program, because we know there's so many smaller diversified operations that are, you know, maybe in some ways, especially around cold storage, handling a lot of those types of products.
Do you know if the equipment only proposals can also be collaborative, or are those supposed to be to kind of a single entity?
I think they can be collaborative. They can be to a single entity as well. I mean, I think both of those options would be fine. I think the emphasis will be made on whether their project is actually supporting more than one type of grower or producer. And so I think most of the competitive applications, if they are, you know, if it's one individual processor, but they're going to be supporting, you know, 10 different growers with their project, they would be more competitive than, you know, than a single processor that's maybe only handling one type of specialty crop, and they're proposing to put a press on their property, and that's only going to be benefiting their farm. Then I would say that's probably not going to be competitive.
Okay, I think we got about 15 minutes left for the meeting, so
Okay.
we'll move on.
So I'm probably just gonna go through this in like 30 seconds, but specialty crop block grant is open. And I think most of you know that, but this is a program that's available to specialty crop producers and processors. Specialty crops are fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, lots of other, you know, dried fruits, and some nursery crops. There's a complete list on the USDA's website of what those specialty crops are. You know, things like honey are also a specialty crop, dulse, kelp, those type. There's a lot, actually quite a list, and we've tried to actually get more Oregon specific specialty crops on the approved list for some time. But essentially, the funds are used to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops in Oregon, either through research, consumption, or promotion. I have actually a little bwillamette of an accolade to Willamette Farm and Food here, because they currently have a specialty crop block grant, and they're going to be using it to host some of their events to promote different types of specialty crops grown in the Central Valley. And so those are kind of, so that's, you know, that's kind of essentially what the funding can be used for. We have, I think, let's see, we have about $2 million available for this fiscal year. You can see the grant cycle dates there. We're actually in the application is open right now, and it closes on the 31st. And you can see the award ranges. There is no match requirement for this grant program. It is reimbursement based. We unfortunately can't run this one as a disbursement. So you do have to have the upfront capital to cover some of those early costs of your project. But let's see, nonprofits, universities, lots of trade associations are eligible for this grant program. We've had lots of small nonprofits like Willamette Farm and Food Coalition, Zenger Farm, Rogue Farm Corps. They have been, you know, over the years funded through specialty crops. So if you have any questions, reach out to Gabrielle or to me about this program. And I'll just quickly go to the next slide. So we do have the another program, which is I mentioned the farm to school program at the start of the meeting, but essentially we have at ODA a farm to school producer equipment and infrastructure grant. It is essentially, the purpose of it is to help farmers, fishers and processors overcome some of the costs associated with equipment and infrastructure necessary to get products into a form that schools can use or other school-like programming that's happening on reservations. So what's happening differently with this biennium is there's actually going to be more emphasis on tribal programming and tribal meal programming that we haven't tribal producers have always been eligible, but the grant hasn't clearly defined the ways in which they can use the funds. So we're actually in a DOJ review right now for this grant program to make sure that the types of terms that we're using, like tribal enterprises and other things, are actually going to work and be implementable for Indigenous and tribal groups. But essentially, these funds can be used in all the ways that the RFSI funding can be used for. The one distinction is that producers can actually use these funds for production-based activities. So greenhouses, cultivators, seed savers, anything that you might need on your fishing vessel for actually catching fish. So there's lots of ways in which this one is a little bit more unique than some of the other ones I was talking about today. Anybody who borrows, leases, or rents land or owns land where crops are cultivated or livestock is raised, seafood harvesters, Oregon food manufacturers are technically eligible for these funds. And we have $500,000 available. And this is also disbursement based. We actually do 75% of the disbursement of these funds upfront. I don't know if Michelle is still on the call, but Michelle Week is a farm to school grantee recipient and has these funds for some mobile equipment and infrastructure that she needs because she's currently leasing her land. So that's one of the, I think, unique aspects of this grant and can be really helpful for some of those producers who are not in a permanent land ownership situation. So anyway, I'll be getting this one out hopefully soon. And yeah, if there's any questions about it now, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, can always do that later. I know we're running out of time. So, and then I think for the last one, the Oregon Meat Processing Grant, I believe, just closed. So, and I think many people are probably familiar with that. And I've been working a little bit with the Oregon Pasture Network and others on just getting the word out about this one. So I think I'll stop there. I want to make sure Andrew has time. I know he has some updates he wants to give.
Amazing. Thank you, Amy. This is great. All one-stop shop on all this stuff. This is really awesome. We did a recording yesterday on the disaster resilience grant program, so I can just do a really top line on that. So let's make sure if anyone has any questions, they can ask them of you now. And if not, I'll go into mine. Okay, no questions? Going once, twice? Okay. Great. Okay. So I'm going to share a little bit on the new, just released Farmer and Rancher Disaster Resilience Program that is now live. I'm going to share my screen. Wallace, hey, do you have a question? I can't hear you.
I've had a lot of.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, I don't have any questions. I was just been listening in because a lot of producers have been asking me a lot of questions and I have a lot of answers. So it's been good to learn.
Good. Thanks for being here. Okay, so can you all see my screen? I'll just, if you can't, say no. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, this is the details of my little slideshow here on the OCFSN Farm and Rancher Disaster Resilience Grant Program. Basically, you can find all the details on the grant program all the timeline, the materials, application form, everything, both in English and in Spanish at these websites. I just threw one in the chat too, but it's just ocfsn.org/disaster resilience grant. And you can find that quite easily. Basically, the funding for this grant is for on-farm disaster resilience projects and plans. And this money is from the Oregon legislature. We got in the 2023 legislature $2.65 million over the next 2 years to re-grant to small farms across Oregon to make their operations more disaster resilient. This is general fund money, and OCFSN is managing it, and we've got support from staff at Friends of Family Farmers to support and administer the grant. We also have many contractors doing translation, grant review committee work, outreach, and advising on the grant. It builds off of the 2022 successful Farmer and Rancher Disaster Relief Program. 2021 was a brutal farm year. ODA had their ODAP program, Oregon Disaster Assistance Program, and there was some money put towards OCFSN to do some relief granting to small farmers, those folks that weren't eligible for the ODAP program. And that went really well. And so the legislature said, hey, why don't we do some more proactive granting to small farmers to make their operations more resilient to these types of impacts. We had a farmer and expert advisory committee who went through our initial planning of the program and made a bunch of comments and improvements so we have a really awesome farmer advised grant and a list of resilience strategies. So we have a whole list of potentially things that folks can implement on their farms. We've got 2 funding pools, similar timeline, just difference in the application process. We got a small grants of $1,000 to up to $9,999, and then large grants $10,000 to $50,000. We did this because we wanted to get money to as many farms across Oregon as possible, but also wanted some larger grants to be able to make a deeper impact on some farms. So we kind of did that, decided to kind of split the needle there, split the whatever. Anyways, the grant materials are also all translated into Spanish. There's about 30, we're estimating for 2024, about 34 grants for the large grant pool and 75 for the small ones. Goal of this program, topmost, is to make it accessible to small farms and ranches. We have some priority points for historically underserved farmers and ranchers. We're also prioritizing farmers who have been impacted by drought through Oregon counties that have had drought declarations in 2022 and 2023. We're also prioritizing veteran farmers through the rubric. Whoops. Yeah, we're going to do some really good reporting and testimonial gathering to report back to the legislature to keep this program going. The timeline right now, we've got the application is opened on January 1st, and they close on March 1st. So you have 2 months to apply. Then we're going to review through the grant review committee and announce awards by April. And then the goal is to have the funds delivered by or April 1st, and then have the funds delivered by the end of April. So that timeline, we just got funding late 2023 and tried to turn it around as fast as possible to get this money in the hands of farmers. Before this season, where April's a little late, but also reporting isn't required until 2025, March of 2025. So that's gives farmers the opportunity to implement their projects in the winter of 2024, that slow season. Round 2 is in 2025. This could all change depending on what we learned from round 1. So similar timeline right now, but that could change. Basically, the details on the funding, you can't apply for both small and large grants. If you receive a grant in 2024, you can't apply for one in 2025. You may be awarded partial funding depending on the review. There is no requirement for matching funding, and this is disbursement awards received upfront. Awardees receive upfront payment. Yeah, just go a little faster here. Basically, to qualify, you have to be actively farming and derive some farm income from your farm business, and you have to be involved in the day-to-day operations of your farm. And you must be a small farm under $350,000 in farm income. There's some priority points for BIPOC, drought impacted, veteran, and environmental justice producers. And then the review committee will review your project budget and your resilience strategy that you provide some narrative on how what you're requesting impacts the disaster resilience of your farm. And then reporting requirements are pretty simple, just to report on the some narrative on what you implemented and photographs of what you purchased and implemented. This is the review rubric. You can see this on the website. It just kind of outlines how we are prioritizing farms and the points. Categories are really broad: irrigation and water efficiency, all the way down to planning and monitoring. There's a whole list of different optional suggested projects that you could do. And then also we've got an opportunity for farmers to suggest their own resilience strategy and then describe how that will be positive impact on their farm. Like I said, we had experts, farmers from all over the state in different production systems, vegetable, seed, and livestock, advising us on this program, and then also, and they're producers from across the state as well, and then also folks at OSU Small Farms Program and ORCAN, Oregon Climate Ag Network, also reviewed and helped us with this. And then any contacts or any questions, you can send those farmers to grants@ocfsn.org, and that's where folks can learn more. And I'm not going to go through the website. You can all go look at that, but I can answer a couple of questions if anyone has one. Or if someone came up with a good question for Amy in the interim. Cool. Well, all right. Thanks, everybody. We hope this was informative. We'll put this out on the website and share it with the working group so folks who were unable to attend can receive it. And yeah, hope you have a really awesome rest of your day. Bye.